Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to Evoke Therapy Programs broadcast. I'm Dr. Brad Reedy. Today is Thursday, August 10th, 2023. For those of you that are new to this broadcast, every other broadcast we have a live Q&A. So if this is for current and alumni of our programs, they can attend. They can also share those with their close family and friends so that if friends want to get on or family want to get on and ask questions about what we do, they're welcome to do that also. You can also ask questions for and in behalf of your children or the siblings of the clients that come to Evoke. So any way that you can use it. Before we get into the live Q&A, I'm going to just make this announcement. On September 29th, we are hosting our next iteration of the Conscious Parenting Seminar. This is a 9:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Mountain Time broadcast that I'll be hosting. We have a limited number of entries that we allow so that it can be a dialogue back and forth so that you can bring your questions, bring your stories, your own situation with your own children, and bring that, and we can have a discussion back and forth. Quite different than the podcast, of course, where you can just ask a question. So that's 9:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. It's $400 for the day. It goes by really fast. We'll take an hour break for lunch, and I really look forward to these. I really enjoy these. Really enjoy having that more intimate dialogue with all of you. So with that, I'm going to take the pre-submitted questions, and then I'll get into any live questions from our live audience this evening. The first question that comes in reads, how can I tell if I am enabling behavior or if a behavior is natural and unavoidable? You have explained how people act out because they would rather be unrelenting, disagreeable than fail. If that is what is happening, what can a parent do? What if the person acting out is the parent's adult child? Gosh, what a great question. So, this is the thing about enabling behavior. You really, the only measure of whether or not a specific behavior is enabling, appropriate, what's the motivation, what's underneath it, is finding the person who's displaying the behavior. I can't decide it necessarily because some behaviors look exactly the same, and it's the motive underneath it that really defines it. I give this example where I had a client, and I wrote about this in one of the books, asked about bringing a pack of cigarettes, a specific brand that they only sold in the area where the young person grew up. And the person was an adult now in their 20s. So it was legal for them to smoke. They were going on to a sober living environment afterwards where they were going to be allowed to smoke. There was a designated smoking area at their sober living. So there was nothing legal about it. And the parents were asking me the question, what should I do? Should I honor this request or should I set a boundary? And I said to them, I can imagine you doing either thing. I can imagine you bringing the cigarettes and as a symbol and a gesture that you're not trying to control the child's smoking anymore, that you're giving up control of that. And I can also imagine you not bringing the cigarettes because it goes against your own values, that you don't want to participate in the purchase and the transport and the delivery of cigarettes. So as you see in both instances, you can bring the cigarettes or not bring the cigarettes. And that's not the definition of enabling. That's not the definition of rescuing. That's not the definition of codependency. It is an internal measure. It is from a place of fear, from a place of anxiety, avoiding conflict, trying to please or appease. Those are the ways that I think you know it. And so it takes a great question. I know I said that already, but I'm going to repeat it because it takes a while in psychotherapy to become honest with yourself, to become courageously and ridiculously honest with yourself about what your motives are. In fact, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. One of the measures in mental health that I've noticed is when people can tell you the real reason for their behavior, the real reason for their resistance, the real reason for their reluctance or their decision. And for some people, they can't admit to it. They're either unaware of it, it's unconscious for them, or it's subconscious, which means it's just right beneath the layer of consciousness, and they're ashamed or feel bad about whatever it is that they're hiding from, whatever it is that they're hiding from themselves and from others. I'm going to tell a little story. So I tell a lot of stories of my failures on these broadcasts. I'm going to tell a little success. And I think even the fact that it's such a little success highlights the work. Just the other night, my family and I, four of us, were out at the Sundance Outdoor Theater. It's a beautiful area at Sundance Ski Resort near Midway, Utah. And there's assigned seating, and then above that there's a grass area where it's first come first serve. So we arrived early. We waited in line for that grass area. We hadn't bought tickets early enough to get the sold out assigned seats. So we found our spot. We rushed to the spot. We found it. We laid out our blanket for the four of us. And it was positioned in such a way that there was just enough room in our little area for somebody to sit in front of us if they wanted to, if they saw that open space. And somebody came and sat in front of us, and when they did, we couldn't see the stage at all. This area was meant for one row of people, this small area. So after we talked to them about it and they left, we laid out a blanket in front of us so that people would think that it was being held for somebody else. And at one point, my wife said, let's move it a little this way or that way. I said, it's okay. If somebody comes this time, I'm just going to tell them that if they sit there, we can't see. And that's my best defense. That's my best position to take it. And we were talking about ways that we could manipulate or deceive people so that we wouldn't have to deal with the confrontation. I said, I'm willing to tell them that we can't see, and I'm willing to deal with whatever blowback that there is. And everybody looked at me. These are three other therapists. I want to highlight this. Three other therapists looked at me and said, you'll say something? And I said, absolutely. And they said, fantastic. We'll ride on your coattails. And I share that story because some of you might say, oh my gosh, that's an easy thing to do. I would do that 10 times out of 10. But for us codependent people who see it as our duty to please other people and to make other people happy so that we feel loved and safe and that we fit in, that we belong, that's really hard work, even as small of an instance as that. And by the way, people did come later and sat down, and I had to get their attention and let them know it wasn't possible for them to sit there and for us to still see the theater. And they were able to get up and move to a new spot. So you wouldn't know by watching. You wouldn't know by just analyzing behavior. See, the psychotherapy that I practice, that I teach, the attachment-based psychotherapy that supports the evoke therapy programs, all of them, it's really about getting in touch with our unconscious, about making the unconscious conscious. And if you've seen that image, it's not related to necessarily this, but if you've seen an image of an iceberg, this is used for a lot of analogies, and all you see is about 10% of the tip of the iceberg above the water, and 90% of it is beneath the water. That is a lot like the conscious and the unconscious. The energy that is driving our behaviors is under the surface, is outside of our awareness. So part of psychotherapy is to make the unconscious conscious. So back to your question, how do you know if it's enabling? It's like asking, how do you know when you're in love? How do you know when it's time to quit your job? How do you know when it's time to send your child? I know we ask those questions, and we want self-help experts and psychologists to teach us the specific measures by which we can make those decisions. But we don't do that at Evoke. What we do at Evoke is encourage better self-knowledge through a very patient process, a very connected and safe process, an inviting process. So you figure it out by going to therapy. You figure it out by seeing it over time. You figure it out by going to Al-Anon or Codependence Anonymous and listening to the stories of others. And as you have some success, this is really important. As you have some success against the shame and the guilt that you've been conditioned to feel, you'll find yourself being more honest and aware of what's driving your behavior. And what happens in the end, the coolest thing that happens, it happens in my marriage now, it happens in my family. And again, I want to be as clear as I can that this is a work in process for me, that I by no means have arrived, and I've not met anybody who's arrived, except for, of course, the people who think that they've arrived, which are the people that, of course, are the farthest back on this path toward wholeness and healing. The people that are more advanced are very aware that there's still a long way to go. So with that caveat, what you realize after a while in psychotherapy, I realized that in my marriage and with my children, I can learn to tell the truth about what I feel, what I think, what my needs are. without fear of shame and guilt, no matter how they react. So if I say to my wife, I don't want to go out tonight, I know I said I wanted to earlier in the week, or I know I said I wanted to even an hour ago, I'm really not feeling up to it. I can withstand her guilt. I can withstand her reaction. I'm not saying my wife would have this, but talking about it as a thought experiment, I can respond her guilting and shaming of me. I can withstand her anger. I can withstand her cold shoulder, her silent treatment, her rage, her punishment, whatever it is that she throws at me, because I'm standing in my truth. And that truth is more grounded to who I am. And it's only that ability to stand in my truth comes because I'm not letting the guilt and shame that I've been conditioned with as a child to hold me hostage. So the simplest way that I've described it is the difference between enabling and codependent behavior, and what for today I'll call recovering codependency behavior, right? Healthier behavior. The difference is it done from a place of fear and shame, anxiety, guilt? If it's done from those places, you can't get it wrong. Excuse me, you can't get it right. If it's done from a place of love, of awareness, done from a position of courage, it's really hard to get it wrong. So it's not the thing that you do. And I want to say one other thing. Somebody said this to me the other day. When I talk about this stuff, when I teach this stuff, I'm not telling you what I do all the time. When a client says to me, "What would you do?" I say, "Well, I suppose that depends. It depends if I was in a good space at the time, if I was feeling anxious, if I was feeling that drive, that pull to please, to avoid conflict, to not make somebody upset or disappointed in me, I probably would decide X or Y. If I was feeling grounded, if I wasn't tired, if I wasn't hungry, if I was feeling good at myself, I would probably make decision A or B or C." So it's not a matter of me telling you what the right thing to do, but it's a matter of inviting you all into a process, a deeper process to get to know yourselves so you'll be able to answer these questions. One of the great things about Al Anon and Codependence Anonymous is that they have a rule, a tradition of no crosstalk, which means when you're sharing, nobody interrupts or talks to you. And after you're done sharing, the next person doesn't get up and respond to you, right? They really guard against that advice giving, right? It prevents that. And because of that tradition or that rule, it's a safe place to share. It's a safe place to explore. If you hear anybody saying Brad Reedy says you should do this, they're misquoting me, because I don't tell you what you should do. I'm telling you what's involved in the thinking. So at Evoke, on this broadcast right now, it's an invitation into a deeper relationship with yourself, a deeper awareness of yourself, understanding where your guilt and your shame conditioning comes from, learning to do battle with that, learning to let the therapist or these podcasts or my books help you with that, wherever you get your support. So another way to measure whether it's enabling or not is if it's trying to control an outcome, it's probably more likely that it's enabling. And let me just give you an example of what I mean by controlling outcomes. Think about telling the truth versus lying. Think about that in your marriage, in a situation that doesn't have high stakes, okay? Or a close friend if you're not married. So think about the choice to tell the truth or to lie in a situation where it's not high stakes, so we don't get lost in that. To tell the truth, you have to let go of how the other person is going to react. We lie to try to control what people think and feel and do. So if your behavior, if I take away the consequence of your negative behavior, which is a classic definition of enabling, right? I don't allow you to experience the natural consequences of your behavior. If I do that because I'm trying to get you to realize something, or get you to love me more, or get you to not be mad at me, then it's getting closer and closer to the category of enabling. If I do it because it feels right to me, because it's what I want to do, it's what I feel comfortable with, it's my boundary, or it's my expression of love or support. And sometimes this is the most interesting thing about controlling or enabling behavior. Sometimes we don't know if it's coming from a place of codependency until after we do it. An example, I had a friend one time tell me that she had committed to sobriety, didn't consider herself an alcoholic, but she committed to sobriety in solidarity to her daughter's recovery. Her daughter was new in recovery after our program, and she was doing this to show support and solidarity. And then at some point, her daughter relapsed. And this is when she's a colleague of mine. This is when she called me to get some feedback to process it with me. And she was saying, when I did it thinking that it was just a way to support him. But now I'm feeling really resentful. Now I'm feeling like I did my part, or I'm working harder than she is, and I'm resentful. And I said, now you can see that there were strings attached or expectations for outcomes that you couldn't see ahead of time. So resentments are at times evidence of our trying to control other people, or enable other people, or rescue other people. Choose your word, right? Sometimes we offer something to somebody. You give a virtual or literal gift to somebody, and you experience, if somebody asked you why you're giving this gift, your answer would be, I'm doing it from the goodness of my heart, from the overflowing love that I feel for this person. And then they don't really appreciate it, or they re-gift it to somebody else, or you find it in the garbage the next day. And then you end up feeling angry and resentful instead of curious, right? That would be the contrast. And so you start to ask yourself, did I have an expectation there? Was I giving it with some unknown strings attached? And so I think enabling, the question, to answer your question, those are the kinds of thought processes that go into discovering what's enabling or what's not. You won't know clearly. You'll get better at it as you practice it. You'll get better at it as you listen to examples and stories from other people in these recovery programs. You'll get better at it as your guilt and your shame recede. You'll get better at it as you create an earned attachment in psychotherapy, which means that you feel comfortable with yourself. You feel good about yourself. You feel okay. You have a baseline sort of esteem that is improved, that's not as susceptible or as vulnerable to the feelings of other people, the reactions of other people, the behaviors of other people. So those are some ideas. I think with children, one of the ways today that I work on, one of the mantras that I tell myself to stay out of controlling and enabling behavior, is I say to myself every day, it's not my life. It's not about me, right? It's their life. I can detach myself from the drama, from the pain, from the anger, from the conflict, from the reaction, because it's not about me. There's a lot of little tricks like that we learn as we go along, but ultimately it's a measure about healing. It's a measure about your own trauma, which means that guilt and shame are going to recede significantly over time. And once guilt and shame and the associated fear and anxiety that comes with that, once those recede to a significant amount, we get more clear about what's our truth. And again, it's why I say this, that setting boundaries from a place of recovery from codependency is not about setting stricter boundaries. I think everybody assumes that people in recovery from codependency just on average, on the whole, have stricter boundaries than those that don't. And there may be a trend towards that, but what I like to say is, people in recovery from codependency set better boundaries from a different place. Again, remember, I've told this story before about a psychologist who asked me when I was teaching about codependency. She said to me, after hearing part of my speech, she said, Brad, how can you suggest to us that we tell the mother of a child who's addicted to opiates to kick the child out of the house? when the possible consequence of that is death? How can you possibly suggest that to us? And I apologized and said, I'm sorry if I suggested that. I'm sorry if I misspoke. I didn't mean to imply that. What I would do with that mother, I would never tell her whether or not to kick her child out of the house. And again, that's a good example because I think you can start to hear the criticisms about enabling or not, right? You can hear that. But what I said to the psychologist in response to her question was, I said, to be clear, I would help that person heal their codependency or their attachment issues. I would help them heal their codependency. And then from that place, they would make the decision that's right for them. And I'll say one last thing before I go on to the next question. And I know that I know that what I have to say to you all over the years has gotten more and more abstract, more and more philosophical. I know that. I can't stop it. I can't go back. Can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. But what I will say to you is that as you progress, as you get into healing your codependency, your attachment wounds, you start to realize that the questions in life are not about what do I do. Every day, people ask me in therapy and in these contexts, what do I do? What do I do with my boyfriend, my husband, my wife, my children, my parents, my family of origin, my adult child? What do I do? And what I explain or how I respond is I don't really think it's so much about what you do. I think it's about finding yourself, about being in a healthy, stable, secure relationship with yourself, identifying your own needs, identifying what's not your business, what's not you, what's the other person. And when you do that work of knowing yourself, the decision about what to do is clear. So I don't think of at Evoke, we don't think of the answer and the project about figuring out what to do, what decisions to make in life. We think that the process of psychotherapy is the discovery of who you are, of your truth, of your values, of what's important to you. We think that that's a difficult project because you've been conditioned to not think about it that way. We think that it's a difficult project because people have been apt to sacrifice, to lose contact with their own truth, to get a sense of belonging, to make their parents not upset, to make their parents proud, to take care of their parents' egos, on and on and on. The reason that example that I gave about the Sundance outdoor play musical that I went to, the reason why I told that very trivial story is because that's what it looks like. I was prepared for the person to be angry, to look at me like I was being petty, to give me an argument, and I was in a grounded place with just the fact that I said to my family, and it was a little bit humorous. I was with three therapists, and I said to them, "I'm just tired tonight, and I'm not in the mood to make excuses for an honest and authentic need that I have. I'm not into to masking it or trying to dress it up so that it's acceptable to everybody else. That's where I am tonight, at least. And I'm not always there by any means." So that's my long-winded answer to your very simple and wonderful question. Somebody writes, our son is finishing Evoke next week. Our therapist is strongly recommending aftercare at an anxiety-specific boarding school and no other programs. Our insurance has completely refused to cover this. We have tried a claims denial company. We have already paid for Evoke out of pocket and are just financially cannot afford it without significant hardships and selling off our assets we have or cashing out retirement accounts with costly penalties or taxes. We informed our therapist of this and asked about other options, programs, and bringing our child home next week. But the therapist is firm that our son should not come home. Are there any other options, programs, or suggestions that other things to try to get our insurance to cover? We are still planning to start the aftercare program next week. Great question. Difficult. I have several different answers. In fact, one of the things that I want to happen is Sarah's going to post to you a broadcast that you can listen to or watch, and where you can get this information about all of the avenues that you can take. So episode 2 looks like 254. Episode 254 is the one. Check that out. But let me go through a few things. Number one, I always have to say this, is I have to defer to the therapist that's working with you, because I'm not working with you and with your child. So that's always, to me, a priority in these broadcasts, that anything I say, there's always room for the therapist to override what I have to say on certain decisions, on many decisions. Having said that, financial choices are, they're part of the clinical equation. I've had my children with various interventions in their lives, and some of them have been more expensive than others. And part of my decision, I have to take into account my own financial security. Now, again, it all depends upon where the child is at. For me, if my child is at risk of death or dying, I'm going to make different decisions than if my child is just going to struggle. And I have to figure out where I see it going in that direction and make decisions accordingly, right? But the fact of the matter is, at some point, for the average American, there is a limit to the amount of money that they have. That's a fact. And so with that, you're not making a decision clinically in a vacuum. And it's not selfish or wrong for a parent, or a person for that matter, to make a decision with reference to how much financial security it leaves them with. That's okay. So, having said all of that, I guess I would defer to your therapist, but I would empower you and support you and say, if that, according to you, if that option isn't available, then let's talk about therapy. Let's talk about some family work, maybe a family intensive. I would say to you, make sure you go to an individual intensive if you haven't. And if you don't want to go to Evokes intensives, which I am obviously a strong proponent of, the Finding You intensive, go to Onsite, right? Not just a competitor of ours, but the biggest, most successful type of program like this in the country. The one that I went to, my wife and children went to, that several other employees have gone to. Go to Onsite. Go to the Meadows, the Survivors program at the Meadows, very similar to ours. Go to the house at Ocala in Florida with Judy Crane. Go to the Bridge to Recovery. Go somewhere where you can do your own work. You can explore your own programming, your own family of origin. I would say, if resources are limited, and this goes for all of you watching and listening, if resources are limiting and you're asking me professionally where to prioritize your dollar, I would include an intensive for all of you. And I'm mentioning all of our competitors very, very intentionally, because if I want to take away whatever conflict of interest there is, and that you might imagine that I would have about Evoke's Finding You program, which I believe in. Go to Onsite, go to somebody else and do the same kind of work. I speak of Onsite first and foremost. Judy Crane also, I did an intensive with her. I speak about those first and foremost because I've been to those and had a wonderful experience. I wrote about it in The Journey of the Heroic Parent. So go somewhere else. Or if you trust what I'm saying on its surface, go to Finding You. Al-Anon, right? Codependence Anonymous, Families Anonymous, Adult Children of Alcoholics, for you. And you might say to me, my parents are not alcoholics. Doesn't matter. It's really adult children of dysfunctional families, or even more specifically, because you might think that you don't have a dysfunctional family of origin, it's really adult children of parents. But all of this work, all of the teaching that I do, all of the writing that I do, when it's directed at the parents of children, which is a good portion of my work, is to get you to a place where you're the expert in your own life. Listen to my podcast, read the books. The people that I recommend, J.D. Gill's books, James Hollis's books. There's a handful of others. Harriet Lerner's books. She's a wonderful writer. Alice Miller's drama of the gifted child. Those are the kinds of things, because at the end of the day, if you walk into an Al-Anon meeting, if you folks listen to what I suggest and recommend, and you walk into an Al-Anon meeting, the thing that they're going to tell you is this. This is important. You walk through those doors and they're going to say to you, in essence, welcome. You're not here to fix your child. You're here to fix yourself. And we're not going to give you tools to fix your child or your spouse or your brother and sister or your mother and father or your coworker or your boss or your employees. We're going to give you tools and insight and awarenesses to heal you. And then from that place, you will suffer less in the context of a child or a parent or a sibling or a friend who's struggling or a spouse. You'll know what decisions you need to make if there are big decisions that are pending before you. I'm a huge fan of psychotherapy. I'm a long-term participant in psychotherapy. Like I've said, over 30 years combined, 24 with my most recent therapist, with the therapist I still see today. And I do it weekly because it's a part of my maintenance, part of my health, part of a place to get recentered, part of a place to help somebody carry the shame and guilt that comes up from time to time. Part of a place to go to and to be seen and loved as I am. And ironically, paradoxically, change comes inevitably when we accept and love ourselves as we are. It's one of the great paradoxes in life. So sometimes you can't do it, and it's okay. And you have to make other accommodations. And for the average American, everybody's going to get to that place financially. And it's okay to stand up to professionals and say, I'm not willing to do this. I'm making this other choice now. Now that I've let you know my stance, what sources of support or tools or books or readings or therapists or programs can you recommend? That's kind of what I've done for you this evening. Thank you for the question. Wonderful, difficult, and wonderful question. Somebody writes, my 14-year-old daughter has been at Evoke for 10 days. She read her hopes and intentions letters yesterday, and it feels like she has turned a corner with the response from her letters. My wife and I feel like we can finally relax, as she has tried everything to get out of the program. So thank you for this program. I have an older daughter who is 30 from a previous marriage who lives a mile from us, but I haven't had a close relationship. I want to take this opportunity to cultivate a better relationship with her. I want to connect with her and spend more time with her, but I'm having a hard time doing that. Do you have any suggestions? What a Not just a wonderful question, but what a beautiful question. I can feel your heart in this. First of all, with your daughter in the program, go slow. What that tells you is that your daughter is not so far along in terms of pathology that she can't hear your hopes and intentions, your connection to her. That's a good sign. But the work is not done, as you know, right? There's a long way to go. And when children have that initial response, which they often do more often than not, there still is a tremendous amount of work to go. So take it slowly. Be slow to jump to arrive at conclusions. Be slow. What I say to parents is adopt a we'll see attitude. Let's see how it plays itself out over time. Time is the best tool that we have to assess whether or not somebody has genuinely, fundamentally made a shift. So that's number one. Number two, with your adult daughter, I mean, part of me thinks it sounds like telling her. I would say writing a letter to her, even, or an email, and even having a therapist go over that with you might be a good place to start. You're going to laugh at this, but I would also suggest going into an intensive yourself so that you get clear about what your issues are and what you might have done to create distance or wedges in the relationship with your daughter, how you've hurt her. I've said this before, that when people come to Finding You, our 4.5-day intensive, or it's 2.5 days online, when they come to our intensives, that there are two general responses that I see. The first one, which is a good business model for us, is they come away saying, this is so wonderful. I loved it. I had a wonderful experience. I want everybody I know and love to go to this. And like I said, that's great for business. But the deeper level that I see is when somebody comes complaining or describing the identified patient. It might be a child, it might be a spouse, a parent, a sibling. And after doing their work, they come away saying, I think I want to go home and apologize because I see how I've done things that have contributed to the destruction or the difficulties in our relationship. And I'm going to go back home and apologize, not expecting to be forgiven necessarily. Very different, right? Very different task to ask to be forgiven versus apologizing. I don't almost ever recommend that you ask to be forgiven, but more so that you can learn and have the strength to apologize to somebody, that you can have enough ego strength to have enough psychological wherewithal. So is there space to apologize to your daughter? Have you done something that pushed her away? Could an intensive help you to discover that? And the reason I like letter writing and why I've worked with clients in the past to edit their letters is I don't change what I think they're trying to say. I just work on the language. So yeah, if your letter is under, this just goes for you, just for you. And I'll have Sarah take your name down. Just for you. If you'd like to send me that letter, if it's under 2 pages, I'd be happy to give you my thoughts on it if you don't have a therapist. But also, I want you to get a therapist. Or I want you to go to meetings and get a sponsor and do that other stuff. But just for today, I'm willing to assist you on by offering my edits, my thoughts, my suggestions. So, Sarah, if you can write down this person's name, so when I get this, if I don't get 20 of them from the podcast channel, that would be great. All right, it looks like we're out of any questions from the live audience. I'll go over upcoming events, and if there's a question or two at the end, I'll go back to those. My 2 books, The Journey of the Heroic Parent and The Audacity to Be You, are available on Amazon or Audible. Like I've been mentioning, if you want to do a deep dive into your own work, Finding You is our offering. The next available in-person offering is September 20th. It's going to fill up soon. They're filling up more and more. We're going to start probably going to more per month than we're doing now. Like I said, I want to be clear. If there's any doubt in your mind about the conflict of interest that I, the owner of the Finding You program, have, go to Onsite. Tell them I sent you. September 20th through 24th is the next offering. We also have an online offering, September 15th through 17th. Those are about half the time and about a third of the cost, and you don't have to travel. We started them during the pandemic. I was very skeptical. Can't say that word. I was very skeptical myself about the online offering. And after running the first one, I wanted to make it part of our program forever. And we're going to keep doing it. We also have Returning to You. If you've been to a Finding You, Returning to You October 25th through 29th, which I will be running also. And then we're going to be doing another Finding You weekend in the United Kingdom outside of London in the spring of 2024. We have Custom Finding Connection and Finding Clarity for couples and parents. We also have Finding Family for families. So those are customized. Contact intensives at evoketherapy.com for more information. We have support groups for current families and alumni families August 10th. That's this evening at 7 p.m. We've changed our timing if you haven't noticed. So from now on, my broadcasts are going to be at 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and the support groups are going to be at 7 p.m. Mountain Time so that you don't have to choose between one or the other. So tonight at 7 p.m., you can click off of this. You can get yourself a nice glass of water, a snack, and then reattend the next meeting at 7 o'clock if you want to have more of a dialogue. We have one meeting per month. It's for alumni parents only. October 22nd is that offering at 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time. And then we have an intensive support group once a month. September 12th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time is the next offering for that. Just visit our website at evoketherapy.com/family involvement for more information. We have family treks that can be in-program wilderness family experiences. So if you want to do more, if you have the time and the resources, you can do a family trek during your child's program. You can do it at the end of the program. You can do it in between programs. You can do it if you don't even have a child at Evoke. This is a multi-day wilderness experience facilitated by our staff and therapists out in our field area. Contact admissions at evoketherapy.com or ask your Evoke therapist for more. We have coaches that can do virtual coaching anywhere in the world. They can work with parents, couples, individuals, families. They work on a whole host and variety of therapeutic issues. So contact coaching@evoketherapy.com if you want to make use of one of our wonderful coaches. We have over 40 to choose from. We encourage all current families to attend 6 12-step support groups. I think I mentioned why. Even if you don't think it fits for you, just remember that's the exact same excuse that the identified patient has for refusing their treatment. And so if you learn nothing else by going with these, you know one thing, you know what it's like to walk into a group of strangers and to be asked to share vulnerable things, which is what you're asking your children to do in many cases, or your spouses if you're sending your spouse to treatment. Al-Anon.org, CODA.org, FamiliesAnonymous.org, or AdultChildren.org are places to go to find out more or find out meeting times. RefugeRecovery.org or NAMI.org, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, are organizations that have free classes and resources in your local communities, so you can check with them. All these broadcasts are available on Spotify or your favorite podcast app. Just search Finding You and Evoke Therapy Podcast, or go to soundcloud.com on your computer and listen there. You can also go to Evoke's YouTube channel and watch the rebroadcast of these episodes there. You can find Evoke Therapy Programs and me, Dr. Brad Reedy, on Twitter, Threads, and Instagram using the handles @Evoke Therapy and @Dr. Brad Reedy, respectively. You can find Evoke Intensives on Instagram by using the handle @Evoke Therapy Intensives. And on Facebook, you can find us by searching Evoke Therapy Programs or Evoke Therapy Intensives. And also, Evoke Therapy's blog has wonderful content each week. We also, if you want to give back for people that can't afford treatment, or if you're in need of help, of financial assistance, this goes back to a couple of the questions that we asked or addressed earlier. The 3 charitable partners that we work are ChooseMentalHealth.org, Sky'sTheLimitFund.org, or EvokeFamilyFoundation.org. You can earmark your tax-deductible donations for a specific population or issue, or for a specific program, if that be your desire. All right, looks like I have a question or two that have come in while I've been talking. Somebody writes, any advice on thoughtfully telling our son, who is almost 19, he can no longer live with us if he can't get a job? So what we require is, so that we require in a minimum way, like cleaning up after himself. Concerned about what we should give him when he leaves. He decided not to go to school or trade school. I mean, my thought is, I think you already have the words. I think what you're afraid of is how he's going to react. And going back to the discussion I had earlier, you can't really control that. I think. Remember, one of my other favorite mantras that I learned from somebody who was an expert in dealing with borderline personality disorders. She said to me, she learned in working with borderline personality disorders, people who struggle with those. She said, I learned that you cannot win. You can only choose how to lose. And I repeat that mantra in my mind half a dozen times a day, every day, personally and professionally. You cannot win. You can only choose how to lose. So I would keep it succinct. I would keep it direct. I might even role play with my partner, with my co-parent, with my therapist, or somebody from your Al-Anon group if you have one. I might even role play um, issues that they might push back on, so I know what my answers are if I want to be clear. If you feel like taking a time out halfway through the discussion and pausing it and coming back, that's fine. But my guess is that your child is going to say or do things that are going to provoke you, that are going to cause you to be upregulated and anxious, that are going to cause you to have a fear or an anxious response. And the trick is going to be to stay grounded, to stay connected to yourself. Is there room for negotiation? That's for you to answer. But drawing a line in the sand, keep it short, succinct, clear. Try to let go of how they feel, how they're going to react. Don't sell it to them. So much of what I hear parents do, what I do at times, is I try to sell people on my boundary. I try to sell people on my motive for doing it. I'm just doing it because I love you. I'm doing it for your own good, right? That's one of the things that manipulative people do. We tell the child it's for their good, because what we're saying to them is we want you to see that, so you're not upset with us, you're not angry with us, and you're happy, or at least at some sort of peace with the boundary that I've set with you. So great question, because you start to see, with my answer to this question, all the ways in which our issues can be exposed, if you will. But you're not going to come out of this a winner. You're not going to come out of this with him liking it or agreeing. You're not going to come out of this with him immediately being motivated to do better. You're going to come out of it feeling guilty. Just remember this. You're going to come out of it with some guilt. You're going to come out of it with some anxiety. And you're going to have to learn. You're going to have to figure out over time, like all of us do, like all of you do, that guilt and fear and shame are not measures of right and wrong. They are not things that we can reference to discover whether or not we're doing the right or the wrong thing. Because to get healthier in our relationships, to get healthier with ourselves, we will inevitably feel guilty. Doing the right thing, for lack of a better word, doing the right thing will cause us guilt. And I don't think that's taught enough. So we're going to have to learn to tolerate guilt. We're going to have to learn what I say is we're going to have to learn to do battle with guilt, to confront it, to walk through it, to allow it to exist. Hopefully to get some support from people around us that we trust, like a therapist that's a good therapist, or a sponsor, excuse me, or like I said, a group member from your Al-Anon group, so that people can help us carry it. People can help us survive the inevitable guilt that comes when we set healthier boundaries. But for all you parents who imagine that for you or for your children that doing better, getting healthier feels good, not at first. It feels horrible. It will feel like you're going in the wrong direction, and you'll be told that you're going in the wrong direction. That's why the work is to go deeper and to develop a solid contact with yourself, a solid relationship with yourself. Somebody writes, I'll take this as my last question. My voice is going, I think, for the evening anyway. Somebody writes, my daughter was in a program this past winter after my husband engaged with her therapist. And my husband engaged with her therapist, who was also a family therapist, confidentially without my knowledge, and betrayed me. They both ended up lying to me, and the home team eventually told the truth. I was devastated. The question is this: how do I heal from this experience? I hear you say that it's my work to heal and handle this type of betrayal, but it feels like a bridge too far most days. The person who was supposed to help made our situation 100 times worse. How do you trust again? Maybe you don't trust again. Part of healing doesn't mean that you trust that person again. Part of healing might mean that you don't trust that person again. There are people, I'm going to say something crazy to all of you. I don't trust the average therapist. I trust very few therapists in the world. My experience is most therapists haven't done or aren't doing their work, and therefore, how can they help you or me? So, healing your betrayal. I was talking to my daughter the other day about this. My adult daughter, who's also like I've mentioned, she's a gifted evoke coach and facilitator. And she was talking about somebody, and I talked about this person in my past, and I playfully said that they were my nemesis. And then we were making jokes about only superheroes have nemesis. Real people don't have nemesis. And she said, Dad, most people have lots of nemesis. The fact that you only have one, that's the rarity. And I said, and we kind of joked and laughed about that. And I said, here's the thing with this person. I'm okay with them as long as I don't have to be around them, if I can keep them at a distance. And what I said was, because when I'm around them, when I'm interacting with them, if I have to engage with them, I become somebody in their presence that I don't like. And so when that happens to me, that means I need greater distance. I love the quote I found from somebody. So the name of the person who wrote is Prentice Hemphill. I found on Instagram. I quoted this person in the Audacity to Be You. A healthy boundary is the distance between me and you at which I can love me and you simultaneously. And if I force myself to trust, to engage, to be in a relationship, to work with somebody that I don't trust or care about, or I don't feel safe with, I will end up abusing them or myself. So healthy boundaries, my boundary with this person that I was talking with my daughter about, the distance that I've created with them is so that I don't become something that I don't want to be, that I don't hurt or become cruel to them, or that I don't hurt myself and become cruel to myself. So I think maybe you need distance, maybe you need to pause, maybe you need space. If this is about regaining trust with your partner and you don't want to separate or divorce your partner, if you do, that's your choice. But if you don't, that that means that your partner will be asked by this process to listen to some difficult things, to be accountable for the betrayal, to acknowledge the harm that they've done. If they're unwilling, I mean, at some point, you have to decide, have they given me enough? And you get to decide that. I don't, nor does any therapist. So your question is a great one, and it speaks to forgiveness and trust. There's this idea in self-help sometimes that to trust people or to forgive people is a virtue. And I don't believe that. I think to trust somebody is just something you can do when you can do it. I think you forgive somebody when you can, and you don't when you can't. And for me, keeping some distance between myself and another person, in a sense, and this is not my spouse I'm talking about, but in essence, divorcing myself from this previous relationship that I'm describing and speaking about tonight is because I don't want to turn into something. Is because I don't want to be in a relationship where I'm going to feel horrible and I'm going to end up acting out that horrible feeling on them or myself. So I can love them from a distance in kind of a humanistic way. But if I have to work side by side with them, if I have to work on a project with them, it's not going to go well. So I'm really, really sorry that that happened to you. By the way, the professionals themselves, they owe you an apology too. And for me, therapists and professionals in this field, in the field of psychotherapy, ought to be pretty exercised at apologizing. It models appropriate behavior to clients. It shows what it looks like when you don't have ego, a fragile ego into it. It shows what it looks like when you've grown up and become an adult. It shows what you look like when you've healed from your trauma, right? It shows when you don't need to be right or good or on top anymore. Remember this, folks. The most mature, healed people in the world are great at apologizing. People that aren't great at apologizing aren't more right or more without blame. They're more fragile. So the professionals in your life owe you and your family an apology based on the question you posed to me today. So I hope you get that. All right, folks. Thanks for what you presented. If there are any leftover questions, I'll take them to the next broadcast and answer them on the next broadcast. So be sure to tune in live or listen to the podcast on one of its many channels. My next broadcast will be next Tuesday, next Tuesday, August 15th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. I'll be talking about recovery, what recovery looks like in programs, what recovery looks like in the wilderness, what recovery looks like, more of a conversational discussion of recovery, taking the steps that we talk about in the 12 steps or in other versions of recovery and talking about. I'll borrow some of the ideas from the 8 tools, which is another approach to recovery, from smart recovery, from rational recovery. I'll take some of those too and present them and talk about in a very conversational way what it looks like, what to look for in yourself and what to look for in others. That's August 15th, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, Recovery in the Wilderness. All right, folks, thanks for joining me. I hope this is a helpful point of contact. And again, as always, for and on behalf of the people that you love and the people that love you, thanks for showing up and being willing to do your work. Have a great evening, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.